Hi, my name's Fee, and I'm going to show you how to make a wood workbench. Aim of the game today, not to make a perfect product. It doesn't have to be Michelangelo of woodwork benches. It's just going to be a woodwork bench, and you're going to mess it up. You're going to have a few mismeasurements here, a few gaps. That's fine. We're just going to give it a crack and finish it. I don't have any woodwork skills apart from year 10, so I don't come into this with any professional abilities. I've gone and bought myself some tools, watched a few videos, and simply gone out and gave it a shot. And I'm pretty happy with the outcome. So I'll take you on a little trip with me, and we'll talk about what didn't work, what did work, and maybe some things that you should pay attention to when you're doing the build. You'll need a few things. Firstly, you're gonna need some terps, some varnish, some brushes, wet and dry sandpaper, and a sheet sander. You'll also need some bits for your drill, some chisels. You'll need 2 G-clamps. I'd probably get a few more if you don't have any. And you'll need a set of drill bits. Really only needed to use 2. And don't forget 2 sets of 30 timber screws for your legs and your top. So you need some power tools as well. Circular saw, power drill, and an impact drill were perfect for the job. Make sure you got some extra batteries and a hammer for the chisel. You'll also need some wood screws for the bottom rack. So you don't need a drop saw, but it is definitely handy for those 45-degree angles that you'll cut. You also need a combination square and a pencil. Most important thing, you'll need it regardless. Just don't miss that combination square. You'll hate yourself for it. So let's get into the build. I'll show you what wood I got. So we have 6 pieces of 600 structural timber. That'll be our width. Then our 4 legs of cypress, 90 by 90 and 850 long. Then we have 5 pieces at 1100 for our length. Here I'm starting to mark out the rebate using the timber as a guide and using this set square to make sure that everything is squared up perfectly. I didn't leave a centimetre gap because I'd rather have more space to work with. I'd rather just cut out more as I go and cut twice. I'm using the chisel, cutting just above the line and then breaking it off with the chisel. So you can roughly cut it out, test it with the timber, and then go through and smooth it properly once you know it fits, taking small chunks off at a time and ensuring coming in at the sides. I would encourage you to make sure that you measure up and just take off little bits at a time though, just to ensure it does fit. I ended up having a few gaps in mine, which I had to pull it down after the video and refit some bits of wood and glue it in. So now we're going to get the drop saw out. You can use a circular saw and a G-clamp and just carefully mark out and cut the 45-degree bends. If you can get an access to one of these, I'd recommend using them because they cut so much time out. Here we start to level it out, each side individually, square it. Make sure you take your time with this, it's the most important step, otherwise things aren't going to fit. And then you want to mark out where you're going to put your screws. I marked mine out, I'll put the dimensions below, drill your holes and put in your screws. There we go, nice and square and level. I'm testing out both sides to make sure that they line up, and they do. I make sure that I guide my screws in correctly by drilling a hole in first at the same size as the screw and then putting my screw in. Try small first, test it with a bit of scrap wood to ensure that, otherwise you will split your wood and you'll have to then start again on that section. We're going to cut the center support beam for the second shelf and then G-clamp it up with a bit of scrap wood, measure on each end to the center of that level, and then screw it in using 2 screws each side. I'm using 2 support beams to the top, so I've got extra strength, and as you can see I'm just inching off little bits at a time just to make sure it fits snug. I don't want to take too much off. I'm using the G-clamp and a bit of scrap wood to make sure that it holds up my support beams at the right height, just so I can get those nice and straight. Really recommend it. So I opted for a plywood bench, which is 18mm thick, very strong, looks nice, and I thought it'd just be easier than doing the 3-part bench top for this video. Take the time to square out the top, then get a G-clamp and clamp it on with a bit of scrap wood so you don't damage the top, and then square it out with a set square. Make sure you mark out where you're going to put your screws, and make sure you G-clamp when you're putting your guide holes in, because otherwise the top moves. I didn't do that at first, oops. I used a table as a weight. We had a little coffee table, but you can use anything, and then just pop in your screws as you go, making sure that you put your guide holes in. Always check to make sure that the length of the screws are just under the depth of your tabletop, otherwise they're just going to pop through and it's going to look ugly. Quick lift test to make sure that sucker's not coming off. Handy tip, leave a little access so you can put on a bench vise. So you've got 12 slats for the bottom. 2 of them are going to have the ends cut off, 90 off each end, so they can go between the legs. Make sure you mark up and pre-drill your holes before you put them down, and it's really hard to try and line them up when they shift with the drill. As you can see, a lot of my slats moved when I drilled one in, so make sure you pre-drill your holes into your slats before you put them in the base, and then just vise them down. So I got wet and dry sandpaper because it's much finer than the stuff that came with the machine. Mark it up to the size of the block sander, and then cut it, fit it, and then start poking holes in the bottom just so that you've got somewhere where the dust can get extracted into the capsule on the back. So I blocked off the surface, the sides, and then I just rounded the corners off a bit just so they didn't catch. Then I got a tack rag and just went across it all to make sure I captured all that dust before we finish it. You want to follow the instructions of your varnish. Try and do 10%, 20% terps just to thin it out. This is going to be a sealer coat, so you want to leave it for 6 to 12 hours. Make sure to do the sides, and I gave the bottom of the bench a bit of a touch up too. Now it's time to block it down by hand using 300 grit. So make sure when you're sanding you lightly sand the corners as well and the edges, because that's where the varnish will pool up, and then you want to get your tack rag and just go over it so there's no particles on top when we go to put our next coat on. So you're going to do this another 3 times, ensuring that you block it down and then tack rag it down. Make sure you let the coats dry for the maximum time. It says on the can, mine said 12 hours if cold, or 6 hours if warm, so I let mine sit for 12 hours each time. The sander came really in handy getting rid of those little marks, imperfections and laser prints on the wood. I didn't stain any of it, but you can if you want. I just did the clear coat on top to stop the plywood from chipping and fraying. As you noticed before, I did have gaps, so I've gotten some scraps and plugged them in. I used glue after this video just to make sure that they set properly, and it worked very well. So the end product was actually quite nice. Inside it looked quite nice. It didn't look like a workbench. It's very strong. Me and my housemate sat on it and it didn't budge. I can fit a heap of stuff in there. I'm going to do some future videos where I put some shelving into it. It's going to be my desk for my workshops now. I would definitely recommend checking out the Miner 10 guide below. I actually sourced the PDF, which is pretty extensive on how to do it, but it was much harder than I thought it would be compared to the video that he'd shown. So definitely be ready to break this project up. It actually looked nice inside as an internal desk as well, so you might want to use it as an indoor workshop bench as well, but the sky's the limit in terms of what you can do with it. So, you got yourself a workbench, or you're still going, that's okay. Take your time and enjoy the process. Make mistakes and be creative, be daring with the decisions that you make with it. Just don't rush it. Take it bit by bit if you need. I did. I took myself over a couple days after work and had a crack, and it was fun. At the end of the day, you're gonna make mistakes, and they're the times, the critical times, where you're going to figure out what you really need to improve on and what you didn't know before. Relish those times. My table far from perfect. I mismeasured a few times and made some really dodgy cuts, and I plugged it up with some wood and some screws, and I'll learn from it. So, pat yourself on the back. You've just created something wonderful, or you've had a crack at it, and I'm proud of you. As always, stay positive, stay kind, and stay creative. I'll see you next build.